a small, peaceful town surrounded by gentle hills and lush greenery, there lived an elderly woman named Margaret. She was a kind-hearted soul with a quiet demeanor that made her beloved by everyone in the community. Margaret had spent most of her life working as a librarian at the local library, where she spent countless hours surrounded by books, her greatest passion. Her home, a modest cottage on the edge of town, reflected her personality, warm, inviting, and filled with stories waiting to be told. Margaret's days were simple but fulfilling. Every morning she would wake up early, sip a cup of tea while watching the sunrise from her porch, and then head to work. At the library, she helped children find their favorite stories, guided students through research projects, and even recommended novels to adults looking for something new to read. But what truly set Margaret apart wasn't just her love for books, it was her ability to connect with people. She had a way of making everyone feel seen and valued, whether it was through a heartfelt conversation or a thoughtful recommendation. Despite being surrounded by so many wonderful people, Margaret often felt a deep loneliness inside. Her husband had passed away years ago, leaving her without a partner to share her joys and sorrows. Though she cherished the memories they had created together, the silence in her home sometimes weighed heavily on her heart. It wasn't until one fateful afternoon that everything changed, and her life took a turn toward something extraordinary. It happened during one of Margaret's visits to the local animal shelter. She didn't plan to go there. It was more of a spontaneous decision. That day, after finishing her shift at the library, she decided to take a different route home. As she walked past the shelter, she noticed a tiny kitten sitting in a cage near the window. The little creature looked frail and frightened, its wide eyes scanning the room as if searching for someone who might care. Something about the kitten tugged at Margaret's heartstrings, and before she knew it, she found herself walking inside. The shelter staff greeted her warmly and explained that the kitten had been abandoned just a few days earlier. No one knew much about his past except that he seemed malnourished and scared. Margaret knelt down beside the cage and gently extended her hand. To her surprise, the kitten cautiously approached her, sniffing her fingers before letting out a soft meow. In that moment, Margaret felt an instant connection, a spark of hope that perhaps this little creature could fill the void in her life. She named him Whiskers because of his long, delicate whiskers that twitched whenever he explored something new. From the very beginning, Whiskers proved to be more than just a pet. He became Margaret's constant companion. He followed her everywhere, curling up on her lap while she read books, lounging by her feet as she cooked dinner, and even accompanying her to the garden when she tended to her flowers. Margaret quickly realized that Whiskers wasn't just dependent on her for food and shelter. He brought joy and purpose into her life in ways she hadn't anticipated. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. On rainy afternoons, Margaret would sit by the window with a cup of tea, reading aloud from her favorite novels while Whiskers rested contentedly beside her. Sometimes, he would bat at the pages playfully, as if trying to join in the storytelling. Other times, he would simply gaze at her with his big, curious eyes, as though listening intently to every word. These moments became some of Margaret's happiest memories, filling her home and her heart with warmth and laughter. Whiskers also had a mischievous side that kept Margaret entertained. He loved chasing shadows, pouncing on stray socks, and knocking over anything left unattended on low shelves. Margaret often chuckled at his antics, calling him her little troublemaker with affectionate exasperation. Yet despite his playful nature, Whiskers possessed an uncanny ability to sense when Margaret needed comfort. On days when she felt particularly lonely or overwhelmed, he would nuzzle against her cheek or curl up beside her, offering silent support. That spoke volumes. As the years went by, Margaret and Whiskers became inseparable. They shared not only a home but also a deep understanding of each other. Margaret talked to Whiskers as if he were human, sharing her thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment. Whether it was reminiscing about her late husband, discussing a challenging situation at the library, or simply marveling at the beauty of a sunset, Whiskers listened attentively, his presence providing solace and companionship. To outsiders, their relationship might have seemed unusual. After all, how Could a person form such a profound bond with an animal? But to Margaret, Whiskers wasn't just a cat, he was her family. He reminded her of the importance of unconditional love, teaching her that even in the smallest creatures there is immense capacity for kindness and devotion. And for Whiskers, Margaret wasn't merely his owner, she was his entire world. He relied on her for care and protection, but more importantly, he adored her with a loyalty that transcended words. Their story was one of mutual dependence and unwavering affection. Margaret gave Whiskers a second chance at life, rescuing him from uncertainty and despair. In return, Whiskers gave Margaret a reason to smile, laugh, and look forward to each new day. Together, they formed a partnership that defied logic yet resonated deeply with anyone fortunate enough to witness it. Little did they know, however, that their bond would soon face its greatest test, one that would reveal the true depth of their connection and leave an indelible mark on those around them. As the years passed, Margaret and Whiskers continued to share their quiet, happy life together. Their days followed a comforting rhythm. Mornings spent sipping tea on the porch, afternoons filled with reading or tending to the garden, and evenings curled up by the fireplace. To anyone who knew them, it seemed as though their bond would last forever, but life, as it often does, had other plans. One crisp autumn morning, the town woke to golden sunlight streaming through the trees and a gentle breeze rustling the fallen leaves. It was the kind of day that made people feel grateful for the beauty of nature. However, for Margaret's neighbors, the calm was soon shattered by an unexpected tragedy. When Margaret didn't show up for her usual morning walk or her shift at the library, concern began to spread. A few concerned friends decided to check on her. They knocked on her door repeatedly but received no answer. Peering through the windows, they saw Whiskers pacing anxiously inside, his tail flicking back and forth in agitation. Something wasn't right. After contacting the authorities, the door was carefully opened, and the worst fears were confirmed. Margaret had passed away peacefully in her sleep. The news sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community. Everyone mourned the loss of the woman who had been a pillar of kindness and wisdom in their lives. Whiskers, too, seemed to sense that something terrible had happened. From the moment Margaret's body was discovered, he became unusually restless. He meowed incessantly, his cries echoing through the empty house. At first, the neighbors assumed he was simply hungry or confused, so they tried to comfort him by offering food and water. But nothing seemed to soothe him. Whiskers refused to eat, barely touched his water bowl, and spent hours wandering from room to room as if searching for Margaret. His once bright eyes grew dull, and his playful energy vanished completely. The townspeople did their best to care for Whiskers during this difficult time. Some brought treats, others offered toys, and a few even attempted to pet him in hopes of providing comfort. But Whiskers remained distant, uninterested in anything they offered. Instead, he sat by the front door for hours, staring out as if waiting for Margaret to return. It was heartbreaking to watch, a creature so full of life now reduced to a shadow of his former self. Funeral arrangements were made quickly, and Margaret was laid to rest in the local cemetery, a serene place surrounded by tall oak trees and vibrant flowers. Her grave was marked with a simple yet elegant headstone bearing her name and dates of birth and death. Friends and family gathered to pay their respects, sharing stories about Margaret's generosity, humor, and love for books. Whiskers, however, wasn't allowed to attend the funeral. Concerned that he might cause a disturbance or run away, the neighbors kept him indoors during the ceremony. But keeping Whiskers confined proved more challenging than anyone anticipated. On the day of the funeral, while everyone was gathered at the cemetery, Whiskers managed to slip out of the house unnoticed. With surprising speed and determination, he darted through the streets, following a path he somehow knew by heart, the route to the cemetery. By the time the service ended and people began to disperse, they found Whiskers sitting quietly beside Margaret's freshly dug grave. His presence startled everyone, but what truly amazed them was how still and focused he seemed. He didn't move or make a sound. He simply stared at the headstone as if trying to understand why Margaret wasn't there. At first, the neighbors thought Whisker's appearance at the cemetery was a coincidence. Perhaps he had wandered off and stumbled upon the gathering by chance. They gently coaxed him away from the grave and brought him back home, hoping he would settle down. But the next morning, they discovered him missing again. This time, when they went looking for him, they found him exactly where they had left him the day before, by Margaret's grave. And so it continued, day after day. No matter how far they took him or how securely they closed the doors, Whiskers always found his way back to the cemetery. His behavior puzzled everyone. Was he grieving? Did he think Margaret would come back if he waited long enough? Or was there some deeper reason behind his daily pilgrimage? Whatever the explanation, one thing was clear. Whiskers wasn't just mourning, he was honoring Margaret in his own unique way. Each visit to the cemetery felt like a testament to their unbreakable bond, a reminder of the love that transcended even death itself. The townspeople couldn't help but be moved by Whiskers' devotion. Many of them stopped by the cemetery to see him, bringing snacks or blankets to keep him comfortable. Children whispered stories about how Whiskers must have magical powers to find his way back every time, while adults marveled at the depth of his loyalty. Some even speculated that Whiskers understood more than anyone gave him credit for, that perhaps he remembered something important about Margaret's final resting place. Despite their admiration, however, worry lingered in the air. Whiskers was growing thinner by the day, his fur losing its luster and his movements becoming slower. The neighbors feared that his refusal to eat properly would eventually take a toll on his health. They pleaded with him to come home, promising to take care of him and give him all the love he needed. But Whiskers remained resolute, unwilling or unable to leave Margaret's side. Over time, Whiskers' story began to spread beyond the small town. Visitors from neighboring areas came to catch a glimpse of the loyal cat who refused to abandon his owner, even in death. Some brought cameras to capture the poignant scene, while others left tokens of respect, flowers, handwritten notes, or small trinkets placed near the grave. The cemetery, once a quiet retreat for reflection, transformed into a place of pilgrimage for those touched by Whiskers' unwavering devotion. Yet amidst the attention and admiration, questions lingered in the minds of those who cared for him most. Why did Whiskers choose to stay at Margaret's grave? What drove him to endure hunger, exhaustion, and loneliness just to remain close to her memory? These mysteries only deepened the emotional weight of his actions, leaving everyone who witnessed them profoundly affected. For now, all they could do was continue to support Whiskers, ensuring he stayed safe and healthy as he carried out his silent vigil. Little did they know the answers to these questions lay hidden in the past, a story waiting to be uncovered, one that would shed light on the extraordinary bond between Margaret and Whiskers, and explain why the cemetery held such significance for both of them. Whiskers' daily visits to Margaret's grave became a part of the town's rhythm, as natural as the rising and setting of the sun. Each morning, rain or shine, he would make his way to the cemetery, navigating the winding paths with an uncanny sense of direction. The townspeople grew accustomed to seeing him there, sitting quietly by the headstone, his green eyes fixed on the engraved name as if waiting for something or someone to appear. It was a sight that tugged at heartstrings and sparked endless conversations among the locals. At first, people assumed Whiskers' behavior was driven by grief, a natural response to losing the person who had been his entire world. After all, animals often mourn their owners in ways that mirror human emotions. But as days turned into weeks and Whiskers showed no signs of moving on, curiosity began to outweigh sympathy. Why did he keep returning to the same spot? What drew him to the cemetery day after day? Was it simply loyalty, or was there something more profound at play? One person who couldn't shake these questions was Emily, a young journalist who had recently moved to the town. Emily had always been drawn to stories about connections, whether between humans, animals, or even places, and Whiskers' story struck her as particularly compelling. She had heard whispers of the loyal cat from neighbors, and decided to visit the cemetery herself to see what all the fuss was about. When she arrived, she found Whiskers exactly where everyone said he would be, Sitting patiently beside Margaret's grave, his tail wrapped neatly around his paws, Emily approached cautiously, not wanting to startle him. "Hey there, buddy," she murmured softly, crouching down a few feet away. Whiskers glanced at her briefly but quickly returned his gaze to the headstone. His expression was unreadable, yet somehow deeply poignant. Emily felt a lump rise in her throat. There was something almost sacred about the scene. A lone cat keeping vigil over the resting place of the woman who had loved him unconditionally. Over the next few days, Emily made it a point to visit the cemetery regularly. She brought snacks and water, though Whiskers rarely touched them. Instead, he seemed content to sit in silence, occasionally flicking his ears or twitching his whiskers. During these visits, Emily struck up conversations with the cemetery caretaker, a kind, elderly man named Mr. Thompson who had known Margaret well. Through their talks, she pieced together fragments of Margaret's life, how she had been a devoted librarian, a loving wife, and a cherished member of the community. Yet none of this explained why Whiskers was so attached to the cemetery specifically. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily decided to dig deeper. She visited Margaret's home, which had been left untouched since her passing, hoping to find clues that might shed light on the mystery. Inside, the house was filled with memories, stacks of books lining every wall, faded photographs on the mantelpiece, and a cozy armchair where Margaret must have spent countless hours reading. As Emily explored, she noticed a small wooden box tucked away on a shelf. Curious, she opened it and discovered a collection of old letters, newspaper clippings, and photographs. The contents of the box painted a picture of Margaret's life before Whiskers entered it. One letter, written in delicate handwriting, described how Margaret had struggled after her husband's death. She wrote about feeling lost and overwhelmed, unable to find joy in the things that once brought her happiness. Another clipping mentioned her frequent visits to the cemetery, where she sought solace among the graves. It was during one of these visits, the article noted, that Margaret had stumbled upon a tiny kitten shivering near a headstone, the very same kitten who would later become Whiskers. As Emily read through the documents, a realization dawned on her. The cemetery wasn't just a place where Margaret had been laid to rest. It was also where her bond with Whiskers had begun. Years ago, when Margaret was at her lowest point, she had found Whiskers abandoned and alone, much like she had felt herself. In rescuing him, she had given him a second chance at life, and in doing so, she had unknowingly given herself a reason to keep going. The cemetery represented both the beginning and the end of their journey together, a powerful symbol of the love and connection they shared. Armed with this newfound understanding, Emily shared her findings with the townspeople. At first, they were skeptical, wondering how such a simple revelation could explain Whiskers' unwavering devotion. But as Emily recounted the story of how Margaret and Whiskers had met, the pieces began to fall into place. Whiskers wasn't just mourning Margaret's loss. He was honoring the place where their lives had intertwined. The cemetery held special meaning for both of them, serving as a bridge between their past and present. The revelation resonated deeply with everyone who heard it. For years, they had admired Whiskers' loyalty without fully grasping its significance. Now they understood that his actions went beyond mere grief. They were rooted in gratitude and remembrance. Margaret had saved Whiskers, and in turn he was ensuring that her memory lived on in the most heartfelt way possible. Inspired by this discovery, the townspeople rallied around Whiskers, determined to support him in his vigil. Someone built a small wooden shelter near Margaret's grave to protect him from harsh weather, while others took turns bringing food and fresh water. Children crafted colorful ribbons and tied them to nearby trees, creating a vibrant tribute to the bond between Margaret and her beloved cat. Even strangers passing through the town stopped to leave flowers or notes of encouragement, touched by the story of a feline whose love transcended even death itself. Despite the outpouring of kindness, Whiskers remained as reserved as ever. He accepted the gifts and gestures with quiet dignity, never straying far from Margaret's grave. To those who observed him closely, it was clear that he carried a weight far greater than any ordinary pet. His presence was a reminder of the profound impact one life can have on another, regardless of species or circumstance. As the seasons changed, so too did the cemetery. Spring brought blooming flowers and chirping birds. Summer brought warm breezes and golden sunlight. Autumn painted the grounds in hues of red and orange, and winter draped everything in a blanket of snow. Through it all, Whiskers remained a constant figure, his silhouette blending seamlessly with the changing landscape. He watched silently as leaves fell and snowflakes drifted, his steadfastness inspiring awe in anyone who witnessed it. Yet beneath his calm exterior, Whiskers was aging. His once sleek fur grew patchy, his movements slower, and his meows softer. Despite his declining health, he refused to abandon his post. Every day, he made the journey to the cemetery, driven by a force stronger than fatigue or hunger. To the townspeople, his resilience was nothing short of miraculous, a testament to the enduring power of love. Though no one could say for sure what thoughts ran through Whiskers' mind as he sat by Margaret's grave, it was easy to imagine. Perhaps he remembered the warmth of her lap, the sound of her voice, or the gentle strokes of her hand against his fur. Maybe he dreamed of happier times, when their days were filled with laughter and companionship. Or maybe, just maybe, he believed that if he stayed long enough, Margaret would return to him. Whatever the reason, Whiskers' vigil continued, touching the hearts of everyone who encountered it. His story spread far beyond the borders of the small town, drawing visitors from distant places who came to pay their respects, not only to Margaret but also to the loyal cat who refused to let her memory fade. In doing so, Whiskers became more than just a pet. He became a symbol of devotion, a living embodiment of the idea that love knows no bounds. And so, the cycle repeated itself. Each sunrise greeted by Whiskers' steady presence, each sunset casting long shadows across the cemetery grounds. The townspeople marveled at his determination, finding comfort in the knowledge that even in the face of loss, some bonds remain unbroken. For now, all they could do was stand back and watch, awestruck, by the quiet courage of a creature who chose to honor his owner in the most extraordinary way imaginable. Emily's discovery about the cemetery being the place where Margaret and Whiskers' bond first began transformed the way people viewed Whiskers' vigil. It wasn't just a story of loss anymore. It was a story of beginnings, resilience, and an unbreakable connection that spanned years. The townspeople couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of admiration for Whiskers. They started looking at him not as a grieving pet, but as a guardian of memories, someone who carried the essence of Margaret's spirit in his quiet presence. Word of Emily's findings spread quickly throughout the town. People gathered in coffee shops, parks, and even outside the library to discuss what they had learned. Some shared their own memories of Margaret, recounting how she had touched their lives with her kindness and wisdom. Others spoke about the times they had seen Whiskers, trailing behind her during her daily walks or lounging on her porch. These stories painted a vivid picture of a woman whose love extended beyond human relationships to include the smallest and most vulnerable creatures. The revelation also sparked curiosity among those who hadn't known Margaret personally. Visitors from neighboring towns began arriving in droves, eager to witness the legendary cat who refused to leave his owner's grave. The cemetery, once a serene and seldom visited place, became a hub of activity. Families brought their children, photographers captured images of Whiskers against the backdrop of gravestones, and strangers left mementos, flowers, handwritten notes, and even small toys, as tokens of respect. Each item added to the growing collection around Margaret's headstone, turning it into a makeshift shrine. Despite the attention, Whiskers remained unfazed. He continued his routine as if nothing had changed, sitting quietly beside Margaret's grave regardless of the crowd. His calm demeanor only deepened the emotional impact of his actions. To the visitors, he wasn't just a cat. He was a symbol of loyalty and devotion, a reminder that love can transcend even death itself. Among the visitors was a young girl named Lily, who came with her parents one sunny afternoon. She carried a stuffed animal in her arms, a plush kitten she had named Whisker Jr. When she saw the real Whiskers sitting by the grave, her eyes widened with wonder. "Is that him?" she whispered to her mother, clutching the toy tightly. Her mother nodded, smiling softly. Lily approached cautiously, kneeling down a few feet away from Whiskers. "Hi, Whiskers," she said in a voice barely above a whisper. "I brought you a friend." Whiskers glanced at her briefly, his ears twitching at the sound of her voice. For a moment it seemed like he might ignore her, but then he stretched out a paw and gently tapped the stuffed kitten. Lily giggled, delighted by the interaction. "Do you like him?" she asked. Whiskers blinked slowly, a gesture often interpreted as affection in cats, and returned his gaze to the headstone. Though brief, the exchange left a lasting impression on Lily, who insisted on visiting the cemetery every weekend after that. Stories like Lily's became common as more and more people interacted with Whiskers. Some claimed he had healing powers, citing personal experiences of feeling comforted or inspired after spending time near him. Others believed he was somehow connected to Margaret's soul, acting as a bridge between the living and the departed. While these ideas were largely speculative, they reflected the profound effect Whiskers had on those around him. For Emily, however, the mystery of Whiskers' behavior still lingered. Yes, she had uncovered the significance of the cemetery in Margaret and Whiskers' lives, but there was something else, something deeper that she couldn't quite put into words. What drove Whiskers to endure hunger, exhaustion, and loneliness just to stay close to Margaret's memory? Was it simply instinct, or was there a higher purpose guiding him? Determined to find answers, Emily decided to dig even deeper. She visited the local historical society, hoping to learn more about the cemetery itself. Perhaps its history held clues that could shed light on Whiskers' attachment. After hours of sifting through dusty archives and faded photographs, she stumbled upon an old map of the cemetery. The map revealed that the section where Margaret was buried had once been a popular spot for families to gather during difficult times. Generations ago, people would sit among the graves, sharing stories and finding solace in each other's company. It was a tradition rooted in the belief that remembering loved ones kept their spirits alive. This discovery resonated deeply with Emily. Could it be that Whiskers, in his own way, was continuing this tradition? By staying near Margaret's grave, he wasn't just mourning her absence, he was keeping her memory alive. His presence served as a constant reminder of the love and joy Margaret had brought into the world, ensuring that she would never truly be forgotten. Excited by this new perspective, Emily shared her findings with the townspeople. At first, they listened skeptically, unsure how such an abstract concept applied to a cat. But as Emily explained her theory, they began to see Whiskers' actions in a different light. His vigil wasn't just about grief, it was about remembrance. In his own quiet way, he was honoring Margaret by ensuring that her legacy endured. Inspired by this realization, the community decided to take action. They organized a memorial event in Margaret's honor, inviting everyone to come together and celebrate her life. The ceremony took place on a crisp autumn afternoon, with golden sunlight filtering through the trees and casting dappled shadows across the cemetery grounds. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers gathered around Margaret's grave, sharing stories and reflecting on the impact she had made. At the center of it all was Whiskers, seated proudly beside the headstone as if presiding over the gathering. As people spoke about Margaret's kindness, generosity, and love for books, they occasionally glanced at Whiskers, acknowledging his role in keeping her memory alive. When the event concluded, several attendees placed stones on the grave, a Jewish tradition symbolizing permanence and remembrance. Over time, these stones formed a small mound, serving as a physical testament to Margaret's enduring influence. The memorial marked a turning point for the town. No longer did they view Whiskers' vigil as a tragic display of grief. Instead, they saw it as a powerful act of love and remembrance. His unwavering dedication inspired them to cherish their own connections, with family, friends, and even pets, knowing that such bonds are precious and fleeting. As weeks turned into months, life in the town slowly returned to normal. The cemetery resumed its peaceful atmosphere, though Whiskers remained a fixture there. The shelter built for him stood sturdy and weatherproof, protecting him from rain and snow. Neighbors continued to bring food and water, ensuring he stayed healthy despite his refusal to leave the cemetery. And while Whiskers rarely interacted with anyone, his mere presence was enough to evoke feelings of warmth and gratitude. Yet beneath the surface, subtle changes were taking place. Whiskers was growing older, his body showing signs of wear and tear. His fur, once sleek and glossy, now appeared dull and patchy. His movements, once fluid and graceful, had become slow and deliberate. Despite these changes, his resolve never wavered. Every morning he made the journey to the cemetery, driven by a force stronger than age or fatigue. To those who observed him closely, it was clear that Whiskers was nearing the end of his journey. Yet rather than mourn his impending loss, the townspeople chose to celebrate the time they had shared with him. They began documenting his story, capturing photographs and videos to preserve his legacy. Children wrote essays about him for school projects, adults penned heartfelt tributes in local newspapers, and artists created paintings inspired by his devotion. Even outsiders who had heard about Whiskers' story felt compelled to contribute. A renowned sculptor from a nearby city visited the cemetery and spent days observing Whiskers. Inspired by his loyalty, she crafted a bronze statue depicting a cat sitting beside a headstone. The finished piece was unveiled during a special ceremony, drawing crowds from across the region. Standing tall and proud, the statue served as a permanent reminder of the bond between Margaret and Whiskers, a bond that transcended life itself. Through it all, Whiskers remained unchanged, steadfast in his mission to honor Margaret. His quiet strength and unwavering dedication continued to inspire those around him, reminding them of the power of love and the importance of remembering those we've lost. Though his time was running short, his legacy was already etched into the hearts of everyone who had encountered him. And as the seasons cycled on, bringing frosty winters and blooming springs, Whiskers sat by Margaret's grave, waiting, not for her return, but for the moment when their journeys would finally converge once more. As the months passed, Whiskers' presence at Margaret's grave became a permanent fixture in the town's collective consciousness. He was no longer just a cat. He was a symbol of devotion, an emblem of loyalty that transcended species and time. People from all walks of life, locals, tourists, and even strangers passing through, came to pay their respects not only to Margaret, but also to the feline who refused to leave her side. The cemetery, once a quiet retreat for reflection, had transformed into a place of pilgrimage, where stories of love and loss intertwined with the rustling leaves and gentle breezes. Despite the admiration and care showered upon him, Whiskers grew visibly older. His sleek black and white coat, once shiny and smooth, now appeared faded and patchy. His movements were slower, his leaps less agile, and his playful antics almost non-existent. Yet, every morning without fail, he made his way to the cemetery, navigating the familiar paths with determination etched into each step. It was as though his body might have weakened, but his spirit remained unyielding, a testament to the depth of his bond with Margaret. The townspeople watched this transformation with bittersweet emotions. They admired Whiskers' resilience, yet they couldn't ignore the toll his vigil was taking on his health. Concerned neighbors took turns checking on him, ensuring he had food, water, and shelter. Some left blankets near the grave during cold nights, while others brought treats, in hopes of tempting him to eat. But Whiskers rarely touched the offerings. Instead, he sat quietly by Margaret's headstone, gazing at it as if waiting for something or someone to appear. One particularly frosty winter evening, Emily found herself standing outside the cemetery gates, clutching a thermos of hot cocoa. She had grown close to Whiskers over the past months, visiting him regularly and documenting his story for a feature article she planned to write. Though she knew she shouldn't anthropomorphize his actions, she couldn't help but wonder what went through his mind as he sat there day after day. Was he remembering happier times? Did he dream of Margaret's voice or the warmth of her lap? Or was he simply driven by instinct, unable to let go of the person who had been his entire world? That night, as snowflakes drifted lazily from the sky, Emily decided to stay a little longer than usual. She approached Whiskers cautiously, careful not to startle him. "Hey, buddy," she murmured softly, kneeling down beside him. Whiskers glanced at her briefly before returning his gaze to the headstone. His green eyes, though clouded with age, still held a spark of recognition, a flicker of awareness that told Emily he understood she was there. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, Emily pulled out her notebook and began jotting down thoughts about Whiskers' behavior. She wrote about how he always seemed to know when people were talking about Margaret, tilting his head slightly as if listening intently. She noted how children often giggled when he tapped their toys with his paw, and how adults sometimes teared up when they saw him curled up by the grave. Each observation painted a clearer picture of a creature whose existence revolved entirely around love and remembrance. But tonight felt different. As Emily scribbled notes under the pale glow of a street lamp, she noticed something unusual. Whiskers wasn't sitting upright as he usually did. Instead, he was lying down, his frail body stretched across the snow-covered grass. His breathing was shallow and his eyes were half closed as if struggling to stay awake. Alarmed, Emily reached out to touch him gently. "Whiskers?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Are you okay?" For a moment, Whiskers didn't respond. Then with great effort, he lifted his head slightly and blinked at her. It was a slow blink, the kind cats use to express trust and affection, and Emily felt her heart break a little. She quickly called Mr. Thompson, the cemetery caretaker, who arrived within minutes carrying a thick blanket. Together they carefully wrapped Whiskers and carried him to the small shelter nearby. Over the next few days, Whiskers' condition worsened. He refused to eat, barely drank any water, and spent most of his time lying motionless. The townspeople rallied around him, taking shifts to ensure he was comfortable. Children brought handmade cards decorated with glitter and stickers, while adults left heartfelt messages expressing gratitude for the lessons he had taught them about love and loyalty. Even the local veterinarian visited, examining Whiskers, and confirming what everyone feared. His time was running out. Yet despite his frailty, Whiskers continued to make short trips to Margaret's grave whenever he could muster the strength. With each visit, his steps grew slower, his pauses longer. On one occasion, Emily accompanied him, walking beside him as he navigated the snowy path. When they reached the headstone, Whiskers collapsed onto the ground, too exhausted to sit up. Emily knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face as she stroked his fur. "You've done enough, Whiskers," she whispered. "Margaret knows how much you love her." It was during these final days that Emily realized the true significance of Whiskers' vigil. It wasn't just about mourning Margaret's absence, or honoring her memory. It was about closure. For Whiskers, staying by her grave was his way of saying goodbye, of ensuring that their bond remained intact until the very end. In his own silent, steadfast way, he was completing the circle of their relationship, tying together the beginning and the end of their shared journey. The townspeople understood this too, and their efforts shifted from trying to persuade Whiskers to leave the cemetery to making his remaining days as peaceful as possible. They decorated the area around Margaret's grave with twinkling fairy lights, creating a warm and inviting atmosphere even in the dead of winter. Someone placed a small plaque near the headstone bearing the words, "In loving memory of Margaret and her faithful companion, Whiskers." Others left bowls of fresh water and soft cushions, ensuring Whiskers had everything he needed to rest comfortably. On the coldest night of the season, under a sky filled with stars, Whiskers made his final trip to Margaret's grave. By then, his body was so weak that he could barely walk. A group of neighbors gathered around him, their breaths forming clouds in the frigid air, as they helped guide him to the spot he had called home for so long. Once there, Whiskers curled up beside the headstone, closing his eyes as if drifting off to sleep. No one spoke. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. Tears streamed down faces young and old as they stood witness to the end of an era. Whiskers' breathing slowed, growing fainter with each passing moment. until finally it stopped altogether. He lay still, his body nestled against the base of the headstone, as if cradled in Margaret's eternal embrace. For a long time, no one moved. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air, a mixture of sorrow and awe. Here was a creature who had devoted his entire life to loving and honoring another being, proving that loyalty knows no bounds. Though his physical presence was gone, his spirit lingered, in the stories people told, in the memories they cherished, and in the lessons they carried forward. The next morning, the townspeople came together to honor Whiskers' memory. They buried him beside Margaret, marking the spot with a small stone engraved with his name. Flowers and ribbons adorned the gravesite, transforming it into a vibrant tribute to the extraordinary bond between human and animal. Over time, visitors continued to come, leaving tokens of respect and gratitude for both Margaret and Whiskers. Their story became legend, passed down through generations as a reminder of the power of love and the importance of remembering those we hold dear. Though Whiskers was no longer physically present, his legacy endured. The bronze statue of him, sitting beside a headstone, became a beloved landmark, drawing crowds who marveled at the depth of his devotion. Children learned about his story in school, writing essays and poems inspired by his unwavering loyalty. Adults reflected on their own relationships, finding comfort in the knowledge that love can transcend even death itself. And so, the cycle of remembrance continued. Whiskers may have completed his journey, but his impact lived on in the hearts of everyone who had encountered him. Through his quiet courage and steadfast dedication, he had taught an entire community the value of cherishing connections, whether fleeting or lifelong, human or animal. In doing so, he ensured that neither he nor Margaret would ever be forgotten. The loss of Whiskers marked a somber yet poignant chapter in the town's history. For years he had been a silent guardian, a steadfast presence who reminded everyone of the depth and resilience of love. His passing left an undeniable void, but it also solidified his place as a legend, a symbol of unwavering devotion that would continue to inspire for generations to come. In the days following Whiskers' death, the townspeople came together to honor his memory in ways both big and small. The cemetery became a focal point for their collective grief and gratitude. Neighbors brought fresh flowers every morning, arranging them around Margaret's headstone and the newly placed marker for Whiskers. Children crafted colorful drawings of the loyal cat, taping them to nearby trees or leaving them gently on the ground. Adults wrote heartfelt letters, pouring out their emotions onto paper and placing them beside the graves as if sharing their thoughts with Margaret and Whiskers directly. One particularly touching tribute came from Lily, the young girl who had once brought her stuffed kitten to visit Whiskers. Now older, she stood before the gravesite holding a framed painting she had created herself. In vibrant colors, the artwork depicted Whiskers curled up beside Margaret, surrounded by blooming flowers and sunshine. Beneath the image were the words, "Forever together." As she placed the painting carefully against the headstone, tears streamed down her cheeks, but a smile lingered on her lips. "Thank you, Whiskers," she whispered, "for teaching us what true love looks like." The community's efforts didn't stop there. Inspired by Whiskers' story, they organized an annual event called A Day of Remembrance, dedicated to celebrating the bonds between humans and animals. On this day, people gathered at the cemetery to share stories of their own beloved pets, dogs who had waited patiently at doors, cats who had comforted during hard times, and even birds who had sung cheerfully through lonely mornings. It was a celebration of loyalty, companionship, and the profound impact animals have on our lives. Each year the event grew larger, drawing visitors from neighboring towns and beyond. Local schools incorporated Whiskers' story into their curriculums, using it as a lesson in empathy and kindness. Teachers encouraged students to write essays or create art projects exploring themes of love, loss, and remembrance. One class even started a tradition of crafting tiny clay figurines of cats which they painted and left at the cemetery as offerings to Whiskers and Margaret. Over time, these figurines formed a whimsical collection scattered around the gravesite, adding a playful touch to the otherwise solemn atmosphere. The bronze statue of Whiskers, unveiled months earlier, quickly became a cherished landmark. Visitors often paused to take photos with it, their expressions ranging from admiration to quiet reflection. Some knelt down to rub its smooth surface, believing it brought good luck or healing. Others simply sat nearby, lost in thought, finding solace in the knowledge that such pure devotion existed in the world. The statue served not only as a memorial, but also as a reminder of the enduring power of love, a force capable of transcending life itself. As seasons changed and years passed, the cemetery transformed into more than just a burial ground. It became a sanctuary, a place where people went to reflect, heal, and connect. Couples planning weddings requested permission to hold ceremonies near Margaret and Whiskers' graves, seeking blessings for their own relationships. Families brought newborn babies to introduce them to the guardian spirits of the cemetery, hoping their children would grow up understanding the importance of loyalty and compassion. Even strangers passing through the town stopped by, drawn by the allure of a story that resonated deeply with something universal within all of us. Despite the passage of time, Whiskers' legacy remained vivid in the minds of those who had known him or even heard about him. His story was retold countless times, each rendition adding new layers of meaning and emotion. Some versions emphasized his role as a protector, highlighting how he refused to leave Margaret's side even in death. Others focused on the lessons he taught about resilience and the importance of cherishing the present moment. Regardless of the interpretation, one thing remained constant. Whiskers was remembered as a hero, a creature whose actions spoke louder than words ever could. Emily, the journalist who had first uncovered the significance of the cemetery and Margaret, and Whiskers' lives, eventually published her feature article. Titled "The Cat Who Waited," it captured the hearts of readers nationwide. The piece detailed Whiskers' journey, from his discovery as a shivering kitten abandoned near a grave to his final resting place beside the woman who had saved him. Accompanied by photographs of Whiskers sitting quietly by Margaret's headstone, the article painted a picture of devotion so profound that it moved thousands to tears. The response was overwhelming. Letters poured in from across the country, many written by people who had experienced similar losses and found comfort in Whiskers' story. Some shared tales of their own pets, describing how these animals had helped them navigate periods of pain and uncertainty. Others expressed gratitude for the reminder that love, whether given or received, has the power to heal wounds and bridge gaps. Emily was inundated with requests to speak at events, write follow-up pieces, and even collaborate on a documentary about Whiskers' life. Though flattered by the attention, Emily knew the real credit belonged to Whiskers himself. He had done the heavy lifting, embodying qualities that most humans struggle to achieve: patience, loyalty, and unconditional love. In interviews, she often emphasized this point, urging audiences to look beyond their differences and recognize the shared humanity, and perhaps animality, that binds us all together. Whiskers wasn't extraordinary because he did something grand, she said during one talk. He was extraordinary because he loved completely and without reservation. And isn't that what we're all striving for? Back in the town, life continued as usual, though Whiskers' absence was still felt keenly. The library, once Margaret's second home, hosted a special exhibit featuring photographs, letters, and memorabilia related to her and Whiskers. Visitors could flip through old books Margaret had recommended, listen to recordings of her reading aloud, or view sketches of Whiskers lounging on her lap. The exhibit became a favorite among locals, offering a tangible connection to the woman and her cat who had touched so many lives. Even Mr. Thompson, the cemetery caretaker, found himself changed by Whiskers' story. Once a reserved man content to tend graves in solitude, he now greeted visitors warmly, sharing anecdotes about Margaret and Whiskers with anyone who asked. "They taught me something important," he confided to Emily one afternoon, "that love doesn't disappear when someone leaves, it stays behind, woven into the fabric of everything they touched." Years later, when Emily returned to the town to revisit the cemetery, She was struck by how much it had evolved. The grounds were meticulously maintained, with flower beds bursting with color and pathways lined with benches donated by grateful visitors. A plaque near the entrance read, "Dedicated to Margaret and Whiskers, whose love reminds us that some bonds are eternal." Nearby, a small garden had been planted in their honor, featuring fragrant herbs and wildflowers that swayed gently in the breeze. Standing before the gravesite, Emily felt a wave of nostalgia wash over her. She remembered the first time she had met Whiskers, the curiosity that had driven her to uncover his story, and the profound impact his devotion had on everyone who encountered it. Though she hadn't known Margaret personally, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the woman who had unknowingly sparked such a powerful chain reaction of love and remembrance. As she turned to leave, Emily noticed a young boy kneeling beside the gravesite, clutching a stuffed cat in his arms. He looked up at her with wide eyes. "Is this where Whiskers is?" he asked softly. Emily nodded, smiling. "Yes," she replied, "and he's finally reunited with Margaret." The boy tilted his head thoughtfully. "Do you think they're happy now?" he asked. Emily crouched down to meet his gaze. "I think they're exactly where they're meant to be," she said. "Together." With that, she walked away, leaving the boy to sit quietly beside the gravesite, lost in his own imaginings of a cat and his owner, forever united in a love that transcended time and space. And as the wind rustled through the trees, carrying whispers of memories past, it seemed almost possible to believe that somewhere, somehow, Margaret and Whiskers were watching over the town they had come to represent. A testament to the enduring power of love, loyalty, and the unbreakable bonds that connect us all.